So first of all, thank you for coming. This is the second of our Hallmark conversations. If you can go to the next slide. You can see our calendar of events there. We're on March 8th, and that's coming together right before your eyes. We've got Jessie McGuire right here, and right after this, in occupying these seats, are some of our alums that are coming back to talk about their lives, their professional lives, including Professor Fisher. He's so please stay for that, and then after that, we're going to kind of mingle, schmooze. These are words we haven't been able to use in 2 years. Schmooze and mingle. Rub elbows in the gallery, where there'll be some food and some drinks, beverages. So that's coming up after this. 4 o'clock we switch to the alum panel. At 5 o'clock we go downstairs and meet each other, hang out, talk to the alums, try and find out, how life is on a much more one-to-one level. Okay, so that's where we are, and that's what we're doing here today. I am really pleased to have our very special guest here, Jess McGuire, who's come all the way from New York City, Brooklyn, more specifically, right? From an agency called ThoughtMatter. Right there. So we're going to have a conversation. That's what this is all about, having conversations. And we're going to, have an opportunity for you to participate in the conversation. At any time it seems like you want to ask a question, just raise your hand. That's more important than us staying on track with a bunch of scripted questions. So if you have a question at any time, just raise your hand and blurt it out, and we'll address it. I want to again thank you all for being here, and I want to thank Susan, who helped put some of these things together for today and for the whole series. So let's give her a hand. It's been very helpful. I also want to thank before I forget, we're going to have 2 moderators for the alum panel, and that's going to be Professor Franklin and Professor Balthazar, who are here. I want to thank them. We're also going to have 2 student moderators for that event, and I want to thank them, and that is going to be Anna King and Taylor Biles, right? Who is here somewhere. So they will moderate the panel. So I also want to thank all the professors who sent students to these events, and the video crew, Brian Wardiga. Thank you for bringing your talented students here to record this for all time. You might send this out to space. People might watch this in a galaxy far, far away. So thank you, both of you, for being here and shooting. And that's the thank yous. So I guess let's get down to it. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Right? So just talk about all right, so welcome. I think the best way to start these conversations is just for you to start. And just tell us your design journey. I've listened to 2 or 3 podcasts. I have a pretty good idea, so I might interject if I feel you're leaving something out.
That sounds good. I like it. All right, awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Excited to be here on International Women's Day. I'm here to help them out with that. No. So awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited. I am so excited to see all your faces. I wasn't sure how many people would be here or what I was getting myself into, but when Ken emailed, I was like, absolutely, I'll come up and talk. That's not on Zoom. So this is my first time talking not on Zoom in 2 years, which is absolutely incredible. And I love seeing faces and body language. So I might get really animated, and I'll try not to scream or mess with my lavalier here. But yeah, so a little bit about me. So Jessie McGuire, formerly Jessie Rezetnik. I like to say that I've had many names. I was adopted. I was adopted from El Salvador. I was raised by a single woman, upstate New York, Schenectady. And where did my design journey begin? It began at Pratt. So I went to Pratt Institute for my undergraduate degree. I feel like an interesting part of my journey about art school was I wasn't really destined to go to art school. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I thought I was going to be in some sort of communications. But I had a kind of a rough sophomore, junior year in high school, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And my mother kept saying, the arts have been a constant in your life, so you should pursue that, pursue art. And at the time, that wasn't something that a lot of parents were saying, because what did art get you? No one was quite sure. And I was pushed into a senior level class. No, I was a sophomore, and I was pushed into a senior level class. And I was paired with somebody named Brian, who was going to RISD. He was going to RISD and had this amazing portfolio. I did not have an amazing portfolio like him, but my mother signed me up for a bunch of classes to be able to round out that portfolio. And I got into Pratt, SVA, Parsons, and RISD, which was amazing, and I was like so excited. And I thought I would go to SVA. Went to SVA, and turned out I did not get any financial aid from SVA. So my mother, as a single parent, was like, well, you're gonna have to make it happen some other way. So I applied for merit scholarship at Pratt, and I got it. And when I arrived on Pratt's campus, I was like, can't screw this up. Can't screw it up because I now have my financial aid, I have it ready to go. And I was there in September of 2001. So that was 9/11. 9/11 happened. And it really changed my perspective on what communication arts can do. I think I thought the lone artist journey of being a painter, sitting in a studio, creating and making was kind of what I wanted to do. And after 9/11, I realized that design and something larger than ourselves can really bring people together, and bring people together to think about what it does mean to be a creative person. What does it mean to build a creative life? What does that look like? So I actually applied to advertising. I didn't want to sit in a studio by myself. So I went into the advertising program at Pratt and graduated after 4 years and realized I didn't know if I wanted to do advertising. Like, what is advertising? This was before Madden. I'm sure, like, had I seen Madden, I would have been like, yes. But it was before Madden, and it was very much, well, I guess I have to get a job at an agency. So I got a job at an agency and hated it. I just didn't like it. I sat outside the door of this woman who ran the agency, and I kind of liked what she was doing. I was like, wait, she gets to talk to people, and she gets to have conversations, and she gets to really, it seemed like, she was really engaged in what was happening, and I was working with a copywriter at the time, and realized that wasn't for me either. So I went into design. I said, well, I actually would rather be making and creating something as opposed to writing messages and things like that. So I pursued graphic design, and I started working at a company called Steve Madden. Steve Madden does shoes. That was at the time when Steve Madden just went to jail. If you watched Wolf of Wall Street, you'll know that Steve Madden went to jail for money laundering, and I started at that company when that happened. So it was not the like sexy, cool Steve Madden. It was the like, oh, you guys are embroiled in a hot mess. But it was a lot of fun. I got to see what it was like. I got to see what fashion was like. I got to see what a company had to do to pick themselves back up after a founder had faltered. And from there, I decided I wanted to continue pursuing design. And the only job I could get after Steve Madden was a design company in Connecticut, South Norwalk, Connecticut. I did want to stay in New York, in Manhattan, but I just wasn't able to find a job. I knocked on like every door I possibly could knock on, didn't get anything, and ended up in Connecticut. It was a 2-hour drive. It was a 2-hour drive. I lived in Brooklyn at the time, and got myself a car, and I said, I'm just going to do it because I need to build out a portfolio. I need to figure out how I'm going to build a portfolio in order to make it in Manhattan. But I ended up loving it. I ended up loving South Norwalk, Connecticut. I was in a studio. The founders I thought were sort of old and weren't sure what they were doing. They were 32 and 33. And I was like devastated to find that out now. But anyway, they were 32, 33. They had started a studio, and they hired 5 or 6 designers right out of school. So we were like 24, I guess, yeah, 24. And we just got assignments, and we just had to do it. We sometimes would have to stay at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, just to get the assignments done. And I was able to build out a portfolio. And I started listening at that time to, because I drove 2 hours in a car by myself. And this was a podcast sort of thing, but there was one on, New York, that was called, but it was Design Matters by Debbie Millman. Design Matters by Debbie Millman. She was doing what was considered the first design podcast in the space. And I listened to it religiously. I was so obsessed with Design Matters. And at the time, I saw she was starting a graduate program. This was roughly 2008, 9. She was starting a graduate program at the School of Visual Arts. Now, mind you, I always wanted to go to SVA. That was like my dream school. So I applied and got in, and it was the first year of that program. They had no clue what they were doing. I mean, they did. Debbie oversees this. She knew exactly what she was doing. But it was the first year, and we were guinea pigs. So I got to do that for 9-10 months and pursued what branding was. I didn't know what branding was. I don't even know if the first year of the National Branding Program knew what branding was, but we were exploring it together. We were trying to figure out what does it mean to be practitioners of branding? What does it mean to actually explore what that looks like? And got to do that for a year and had an opportunity. I do become like obsessed with people, and I have to find out what they're doing. I have to know everything about them. And I saw at a design conference while I was in the graduate program a woman named Christine Mouse speak at a conference. She was the only woman to speak at this entire conference, and I followed her on like every social media there was. I emailed her. I was like kind of crazy about it. And she finally emailed back and was like, I think you need a mentor. I think you need someone to help you. And I was like, I do. I need someone to help me because I don't know what I'm asking or doing. So I got to work with Christine, and she gave me an opportunity to interview at Kimberly-Clark. Kimberly-Clark was in Wisconsin, or still in Wisconsin? Yeah, well, it was in Wisconsin. So I told my husband, who wasn't my husband at the time, that we were flying to Wisconsin and we were going to interview for a job with Kimberly-Clark. So he was like, what is Kimberly-Clark? And at the time, they made Kleenex, Huggies, U by Kotex, things like that. And I was like, that's it, I'm going to go change the world with tissue. And he was like, okay, fine, we'll do it. So I went and I was I lived in northeast Wisconsin for 3 years. It's 30 minutes south of Green Bay, so it's not Madison. It's not like in the kind of urban center of Wisconsin. It was northeast Wisconsin. So got to see what that was like. I'm born and raised in New York, so being in the Midwest was something new for me. Got to also learn what it was to make friends as an adult, which was kind of fun. And after 3 years, I had my first child, and I realized I wanted to be closer to family. So we moved back to New York and worked for a couple of global consultancies, because at that time, thinking about a portfolio, thinking about a resume, it was pretty well rounded out, so I was able to interview for quite a few jobs, which was wonderful. So I got an opportunity to pick what I wanted to do. So I did go to an agency that was somewhat comfortable. I went to an agency that was working with Kimberly-Clark. Yeah, it felt natural. And then after a year and a half of doing that, I realized I wanted to just do something more. I wanted to do something that maybe had purpose. I don't know if I was able to articulate that, but I knew I wanted to do something that wasn't just consumer packaged goods. So I had an opportunity to interview at a company called ThoughtMatter. ThoughtMatter at the time was about a year and a half old. I realized that, oh, here we are, okay. I realized that I'm a horrible interviewee. Yeah, because I didn't ask enough questions about like, what projects are you doing? What is the work that you're up to? Because when I started, when I got there, they were like, well, so can you bring us clients? And I was like, well, what? And they were like, yes, we don't really have any clients, so you're going to need to help us get the clients that you want to work on. And I remember telling my husband, he was like, so you're not going to have this job for very long. And I was like, probably not, I guess. But I had an opportunity to talk to our founder. Our founder, his name is Tom, and I'll probably talk about him a lot because he's a big piece of who ThoughtMatter is. And I got to have a conversation with him. I went to dinners with him, and I just wanted to get to know who he was, what was he thinking. He said, I want to start a branding company because I believe that we need to be thinking about brands in the supermarket. And I was like, wait, what? And he is a philanthropist in his own right. He is an avid art collector. He's a journalist. And I was like, you're doing all this really amazing work in your private life. Why aren't we connecting that with a branding studio? And he said, well, do you think we can make money doing work with cultural institutions and art museums and nonprofits? And I was like, absolutely. No. That is not true. So again, I was like, wait, what did I say yes to? So for the past 6 years, we have been really working on how to build a studio that has purpose at the center of what its mission is, that really is thinking about ideas and projects that are larger than themselves. So this, I would say, slide probably is a culmination of 6 years of work. We now are able to articulate what we do. For the last 5 years, that probably hasn't been the case. But over time, doing more and more work with more and more companies, with more and more causes, we realized that as a design studio, we want to be using the power of design, our skills, our talents, our, what's in our heads to think about what unmet needs are in society. What is happening right now? We are in multiple interrelated crises. I won't get doom and gloom, but it is true. There's a lot happening right now in and around the world. We are seeing what's happening coming out of a global pandemic that's still happening. So the interrelated areas that are on the slide are what we are focused on. We're focused on gender equality, racial justice, sustainability. We are working with cities and governments, and we're really thinking about what does what can design do for these areas, and what can design do for issues and projects that are larger than themselves. So it's a really long story, but that's my story.
It's a story that has many plot points, all hard-earned, and I'd like to hear them. But I think what would be good is, since we're kind of loaded up here, maybe talk through some of the images that are up there. I mean, however much you want to, just so that everyone can see the kind of work as it actually manifests coming out of the mission statement like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll roll through some of these projects, and I will say that right now, as a designer, what I'm designing is a business. I am designing and creating conditions for creative people to feel free and flexible to create and make and do what they want to be doing. So the work that I'm showing is the work of numerous graphic designers, copywriters, strategists, client services, people who are absolutely amazing, operation people. So even though people get degrees in design, communications, and advertising, that doesn't mean you're necessarily working in the programs. You might be supporting a design studio in multiple ways. So this, like I said, is not my work. It is my work to make the conditions for people to create this work. So this first project, we just finished up at the end of this year, NFTs. So we had a big conversation in our studio about NFTs. Half the studio was all about them, half the studio thought they were a scam and ruining the universe and the world and the environment. But we had a really lively debate in the studio, and that is something that, like I said, is very intentional. How do we design an environment where people feel like they can talk about what they like and don't like? That they're not going to lose their job if they say, I hate NFTs and I'm not going to do the project. That doesn't mean they might not do it, but I want to hear from them. I want to hear what they're thinking. So the NFT space is fraught with a lot of conversations around representation, around the environment, around whether or not it is a scam. But one of the things we liked about this client that came to us called World of Women is one artist named Yam. Yam has created a universe called World of Women, and she is focused on increasing representation for women and women of color in the NFT space. So they came to us and they said, there's going to be some big things happening, but we need a brand. And we're like, that sounds great. We didn't know what big things were happening. So we created this brand, and it is a flexible brand identity system. So the O for WOW, World of Women, flexes and changes depending on the NFT and the token that she creates as part of that universe. Since we've done that NFT, she has presented at the Women's Billboard Music Awards. Reese Witherspoon is invested as part of Hello Sunshine. Snoop Dogg just bought a couple. My studio, most people are excited about that. And a variety of celebrities have gone behind it. We didn't know that. We just did a brand identity for a project we did here. Next slide, please.
It's interesting because you were the second person to bring up NFTs and Reese Witherspoon.
Oh, yeah.
In our series so far. We'll see how many other guests bring up Reese Witherspoon.
We should make a game of it.
Yeah.
So this next project is a program called PACE. It is run out of a large conglomerate called NKG. NKG, the Newman Cafe Group, is one of the largest distributors of coffee. I believe they do 90% of the world's coffee, which is insane. But they wanted to create a pipeline program to, again, talk about representation in the coffee industry. Coffee is not just going to Starbucks and getting your coffee. It starts with growers, it starts with communities, it starts with what is happening in the origins of coffee. And like many industries in many areas, the history has not always been celebrated and uplifted. It's historically been swept under the rug and conditions and things like that. So NKG, being one of the largest distributors, wanted to create a program to bring in historically underrepresented individuals into the coffee space. So we created an identity called NKG PACE. It doesn't move, but we created this all around the movement and the fluidness of down there at the bottom left. NKG, so thinking about equity in coffee, the NKG is pushing C and E forward, which is all around coffee equity. So this was a project that is happening right now. It's really cool. On the next slide is the program that helped us get this. Never mind.
Go to the next one.
It didn't.
Next one? Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what it is. It's somewhere in there. But actually, I'll talk about this project, because this project I really absolutely love. This is called Mama Foundation for the Arts. The Mama Foundation for the Arts is a program in Harlem. It is run by a woman named Vi Higginson. Vi Higginson we saw on 60 Minutes. It was funny because I was talking about 60 Minutes with some of our younger designers, and they were like, what is 60 Minutes? And I was like, oh, boy. So anyway, if you don't know what 60 Minutes is, it's a program where they interview people, they talk about things. So Vi Higginson was on 60 Minutes talking about this really amazing program that she has up in Harlem celebrating Black gospel music. And she brings in young people, and she brings in actually seniors, it's young people and seniors, to really celebrate gospel music up in Harlem. And so she had an identity that was very difficult for them to use. Somebody, an agency had done it pro bono, which is something that is a trend, that an agency will do something pro bono, but their best designers aren't on it, they're not putting a lot of hours behind it. So they gave her a logo, and she didn't know what to do with it. So when we worked with her, we said we wanted to create a visual identity that she would be able to use. So that included color palette, typography, ways in which she could actually build out a newsletter, she could build out different elements to get people in and around Harlem excited about the work they were doing and continue to do. She was on with Kelly Clarkson the other day, and she was talking about the logo, and we were like, yeah. I don't know Kelly Clarkson, but it was really amazing to see her talk about how proud she was of a visual identity and how much that visual identity represented all of the work she's been doing for decades. And just how important storytelling is. And sometimes people have amazing stories, but they don't have the skills to bring it all together, and that's where we as designers come in to help. So I like this project.
One of the really, I thought, really cool phrases that came out of listening to your podcast was, "We help those who stand up, stand out." Can you talk about that? Because that's kind of design branding in a nutshell, right? It's to try to elevate someone else.
Yeah, we like to say that a lot of the clients we take on believe they can change the world, but they just don't know how exactly to do it if they don't have the skills, like said, for design or messaging or strategy or like how to bring it together. So we have talked a lot about these clients and how they are doing this amazing work, whatever it may be, especially in the nonprofit space. But how can we help them stand out? So we're not doing their work, we're not doing the fundraising, we're not doing the hard work that happens day to day, but we are giving them tools to be able to amplify and further the message of the work that they are doing. So that's what I was saying about those who stand up, they're standing up for something and they're doing something important, stand out to be able to tell that story. And I think that is a huge component of design and the power that design has in amplifying stories.
Right, because there's just so much white noise, right? You have to kind of somehow break through, and that's where strategy and things like that come into play. One of the terms that's associated with, I think, that phrase is work worth doing. And I know for some students, that has, well, for everyone, it has a different definition. Like, what do I do as worth doing, and someone else might think worth doing is something completely different. How do you find that, and how do you help the people that you work with feel like they're coming to work and doing work worth doing?
Yeah, absolutely. That's been something we've talked a lot about. We've interrogated that phrase for a while now. We use it as our sort of rallying call. I think the first sort of iteration of that a few years ago, probably 5 years ago, we started saying we wanted to do work that we cared about. And so that kind of became like, well, is it subjective? Like, who cares about it? Who in the studio is like, what is that? And because we were building a studio, we were building a culture, we were building a business, we didn't really want to hear what people cared about, right? Like if somebody cared about sneakers, or if somebody cared about music, or if somebody cared about cultural institutions or museums, we wanted to hear about that, and then we'd go out and try to find clients that matched with that. But I think as the years have gone on, and especially this past 2 years, having worked through and continue to work through a global pandemic, we realized we needed to put a little bit more framework to it. We needed to be able to start to think a little bit more critically about what that means. So one of the things that we talk a lot about in the studio is it's no longer the work we care about, it's the work we need to care about. So going back to that first slide around interconnected areas, that is really how we are now evaluating work that we want to do. Do those work, does the work or the client, the organization, does it solve an unmet need in society? And does it solve an unmet need in society that, again, ladders up to the interconnected areas we talk a lot about? So that's where we are now, but it has taken us 5-6 years to get there. As I said, it really started with, let's just do work we care about. Like, let's do things that are worth doing. But now it's become, I said, more of a rallying call with criteria.
Do you feel that the work you're doing is activism? Is it activism in kind of in the shell of an agency?
That is a great question. I think some of the work we do probably falls in activism. I think some of the work that we do doesn't necessarily fall into activism. I was actually reading an interesting article talking about how design could learn a lot from activism and activist groups and things that have happened throughout history. That activism very much, there's a thin line between, but it was basically talking about how activism is all about hope. That you are doing something because you have hope for a better future. You have hope that something is going to be better. And even if in the moment you are rallying against something, or you are marching, or you are creating some sort of activist movement, you might not see the end result. You are in the moment of hoping for that better future. And I think sometimes designers could really learn from that. Like, there are times where we might be solving something or doing something that in the moment, in the short term, doesn't necessarily have instant gratification. That it might actually be that long-term goal that we have an eye to. Because I do think sometimes it is design, and especially advertising in some ways, is very much of the moment. It's very much of short-term gains, of the moment. You are creating a campaign to, if it's consumer product goods, you are creating a campaign to sell more things to more people for more money more often. You're trying to sell cases, and your work is only going to be measured by its ability to sell more things. So sometimes that flies in the face of feeling like you are making a long-term change on something. So I think because of that, if I go back to ThoughtMatter, like I said, we teeter on activism, but we also work in spaces that I would say we have clients that wouldn't say they're activists. They're just doing the work of today.
Let's talk about some of these high-level terms that, again, have different meaning to different people. And I'm really curious, specifically, and I think it will appeal to both, or I think there might be 3 different student communities here: designers, advertising students. Branding, the term branding.
Yes.
I think when we use it in the design context, we kind of talk about, well, that's a logo,
Yep.
But that's not what it is, right? And you went to Debbie Millman's special school on branding.
Special school.
I'm expecting some very, very exciting definition.
Wow, that is, and it's really true. I've actually found myself using branding and design interchangeably many times. Like, oh, this is branding, or that's design, or this is that, and whatever. So I thought a lot about it, and I have to give 100% credit to Debbie Millman, because I do believe she has one of the best definitions of branding because of her special school, not because of all the work that she's been doing. And her definition of branding is that it is manufactured meaning. And I think that is true. Branding really is manufactured meaning. It is creating a promise that an entity or a thing must deliver on. I know there's a whole other conversation about can people be brands. I don't actually think that people could be brands. I think brands are a tangible product or service or thing. And as practitioners of branding, we are manufacturing what that meaning means. We are manufacturing in the hearts and minds of individuals. We are creating that as an identity, what you buy into, if it's the hat you're wearing, or the shoes you're wearing, or the clothing brand. It says something about who you are. You've done that for a reason, and the people behind that brand have done it knowing that that's how you are going to feel, or they want you to feel that way. Whereas I think design is all about creating something, right? Design is all about intentional creations to a challenge. It's a solution, an intentional solution. So that's when I started to talk more about designers, and I was actually just talking recently about this, that I do believe that branding is limitless. I think that branding can do a lot of things, because you are seeing a lot of folks saying that branding can be a movement. Branding can be, it can help a company through a crisis. It can help, move more things, like I said before, to sell to people. So branding itself as a discipline is limitless. But what is not limitless are designers. Designers are the people who are creating that intention, who are making that meaning, who are thinking about what it is that a product, brand, company, or service should represent. So branding being manufactured meaning, and design being intentional creation solutions to a problem.
Good. Are you familiar with like the whole design thinking kind of? Do you? All right. First of all, do you buy into that as a legitimate problem-solving process? Design thinking process is what we talk a lot about when we talk about UX and things like that, where there's these 5 stages. They're supposed to be interchangeable to some degree. The first stage is empathy, and then there's like ideation, prototyping, and testing, and so forth. That's kind of an intuitively arrived at, I think, process that anyone engaging in creative problem solving. But how real is that in your world?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So thinking about my own career, so 2001, I started school, I graduated in 2005, and when I graduated, there was a lot of conversations around design thinking. IDEO, really, putting that out into the space of what is design thinking. It is a process that you can apply to anything to help you solve problems through a creative way. A lot of post-it notes, a lot of way like empathy, going big, going wide, like getting narrow, and prototyping and testing and all of that. And I think it was a real big part of my own journey. And when I went to the branding program and I went to Kimberly-Clark, I was part of the design function. Part of the design management function within Kimberly-Clark, and that was all about bringing design thinking into a corporate structure and context. So that was what I did day to day. Like I was there to help the brand managers who were thinking about how to sell cases. I was helping them think about how they could look at innovation differently. I was helping them think about how they could use their marketing dollars and their marketing in different ways. And so we would do lots of workshops and we would do lots of things like think big and wide, but you don't necessarily know the solution yet. People first, empathy, all these terms that we know. And I think it is really important. I think it is an important structure and an important way to be able to talk about design. I do think that as we are now entering 2022, that there are some there's some interrogation that design thinking needs to go through. I do think that sometimes when we're talking about empathy, or we're talking about putting people first, or we're talking about testing, or the word ethnography as a big piece of design thinking, we do need to start asking who is doing those ethnographies, who is going into communities, who is thinking about solutions, because I do historically, and we know this in the design community is predominantly white, it is predominantly male, it is predominantly privileged. And I think it is becoming more and more important for us to be asking the questions of who is doing the work and who is doing the work of design thinking. It can't just be it just can't be everyone who has that privilege to be able to do that. So that's where, like I said, I think that we're 3 decades into talking about design thinking. I feel like it's now time for students and people to be asking bigger questions about what the role of a structure like design thinking can bring to companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's ever going to be anything wrong with, that empathy stage where you're really interviewing the community to be served by the solution you're supposed to craft. I mean, that's the only way to put those designers who might come from a privileged place, maybe slightly deeper into that setting, but there seems like there needs to be some other way to port that knowledge from the actual community into the design process a little more directly without it having to, you're talking about being filtered through people who already come to that conversation with bias.
Exactly, yeah, 100%. I mean, I think there's always a place for empathy, but it's really being able to examine your own, if you are a designer and you are thinking about this, examining your own practice or your own biases in your own way that you are coming to a problem. And same with a team. If you're on a team and you're looking and everyone looks exactly the same, maybe has the same education, has been doing everything the same exact way, and you all think you're doing things differently, you might not be. So how do you ask those bigger questions? If you're going into communities, how do you really start to understand those communities that you might not be a part of? and not just thinking you can solve that solution immediately, that you're not having this sort of savior complex. And of course, I'm a designer and I can figure out the solution. No, it's how do you truly engage a wider audience and in an empathetic, human-first way.
And we can be talking about grand solutions that serve entire communities, or just how to get out the door.
Right, yeah.
How is it signaling what, which way it goes? And these are problems that are, microcosmic and macrocosmic, and that solution can be applied to really any size problem. But one of the things that you like to talk about, and that I think we haven't talked about but should talk about, is creativity. Because we're talking about almost like kind of scientific approach to solving problems, to research and understanding, to creating, some kind of awareness of what the consumer or what the community needs. And so where does the individual artist's creativity, like all of these people here are highly creative, they probably chose the majors that they have because of creativity. Like they want to make stuff, and how can they continue to exercise that part of themselves, but still be in a professional setting?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that
What is creativity?
What is creativity?
Yeah.
That I can't answer that. No.
Yeah.
I feel like I have definitions for branding design. Creativity. Creativity. I mean, I think that if you are a creative person and you want to create something, you should be creating something. There are times that seems simple, right? But there are times where, I'll be interviewing a designer right out of school, and they'll have a portfolio, they're so excited, and they're like, I'm a creator, and I'm a maker. I'm like, oh, what was the last thing you made? And they're like, oh, well, I had a class project, and I had a brief, and I had this, and it's like, okay, that's great, but like, was that what you created, or did you actually like go and make something? And they're like, oh, well, I really wish I had a sketchbook, and it's like, well, go get a sketchbook, go make, go create, go put that out there. And so I believe that if you are a creative soul at heart, you have to find multiple outlets to be able to make and create and do it consistently. And yes, there's always the question of how do I get a job? How do I pay my bills? How do I pay my student loans? How do I do all the things that society tells me I need to do to be able to have a career? And you may be lucky to be able to find the intersection of both those things, where you're creating something and you have a career, or you may be doing something that you're like, this isn't creative, now I have to put my own creative identity aside, and that is not the case. And we all can be finding outlets for that. I also think that, and something I've been thinking a lot about from just creativity in general, in individuals, is how we can celebrate the multiple identities that we have. So you exist in this world, and there are many things that you might be a sister, you might be a brother, you might be a mother, you might be a father, you might be just an individual living your life doing different things, but like you have multiple identities and you exist here. So how can you celebrate each one of those, and how can you find different ways to tap into them? Because that is how you, I believe, design a creative life and live a creative life. Because if you have to put something aside to do something else, you are going to lose sight of who you are. And that, to me, is really what creativity is. And at our studio, we talk a lot about art. We are very fortunate to have some amazing pieces of art in our physical space. And we talk a lot about what is the role of an artist, what is the role of fine arts, what is the role of that, what is the difference between fine art and design. And we like to say that fine art in general is about seeking imperfection, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. But that design really is about solutions that are right for a problem. So it's that balance and that tension between imperfection and perfection, the balance between intuition and structured thinking. And that's what I think is so amazing being a designer right now, that there are so many different outlets that you can pursue. But you have to be committed to it.
When you were talking about looking into yourself and trying to figure out all the different identities that you might possess that might come into your work, there's an exercise for creative writers about understanding your different languages. So the languages aren't like, what we understand as traditional languages, but they're the kind of subcultural languages that we all speak. So for example, I might speak graphic design, I might speak music, I speak literature, I speak Southern California, I speak herpetology, weirdly enough, you probably didn't know. I was really obsessed with snakes and lizards when I was a kid, and I still remember all that stuff. But all of those things actually, when I write fiction, they actually come into the stories, you know? And I think the same applies for designers too, because this is the other thing. Let's talk about constraints and how constraints can actually stimulate creativity, and then you get a tiny little band of space for self-expression within a bigger template or project with a constraint. But that little space that you're given is enough. When I graduated, or when I was in college, I was a trivia writer, and I wrote trivia questions that had a very specific character count, 24 characters across 4 lines. So 4 lines, 4 times 24 was the question. And what I found was that even with those restrictions, we, as the writers, developed voice that you could see in those very constrained spaces. And those voices would actually have audiences because they would, you know, respond to that particular voice. So in your experience, how do constraints actually stimulate creativity, and how do they provide some opportunity for personal expression within the larger project?
Yeah, I wasn't more about this trivia, but yeah, I mean, I think that in a graphic design branding studio, the #1 constraint is client. I mean, and we can just kind of flip through and see some of the work. But everything on here, well, most things on here had a client, and a client is the ultimate constraint, right? A client has specific problems, they have a specific ask, we are creating a brief. The next couple slides, and there's these 3 slides, 4 slides, is all around the work we do in cities. In New York City, I got all New York City ones, working with business improvement districts. So business improvement districts are all about working with their constituents, which is the businesses and people going through a community. So we work with Union Square, which is a big park, and we are creating design solutions to be able to help with wayfinding, with, you know, they have small business markets, and people need to know what's happening and what they're selling. And that, to me, are all constraints, right? Like when we're given a project with Union Square and we have to create banners. The banners have a certain size and a certain dimension, there's certain things that go on it, there's certain ways it's printed, there's all, I mean, it's like the most constrained project you can have, but then the clients that make it so creative so that people know where you are. And you're like, but I think sometimes our designers will say that some of the banner projects are some of their most favorite because you have these specific constraints that you said, and it then requires you to think differently about how you use color, how you use gradients, how you use typography, how you use, if it's promoting a particular business, how you use that logo and how you can create it. And then what's been amazing with something like a banner physically in a space is you then get to go see it, right? You get to see people looking up at the banner and people knowing where they are, and it changes out seasonally. So I think if you are interested in working at an agency, you're going to need to really embrace constraints, because you are getting those briefs, and you are getting those challenges, and you are going to get a budget and a timeline and real deliverables and milestones you're going to have to hit. And you do have to find ways to really embrace that and make that part of your own practice. And it's fun. I mean, I think that there are ways to make it part of who you are. But going back to something else you said about identities, which I think is really important, especially for, I'm sure many of you thinking about your own portfolios, and you are probably getting briefs from wonderful professors and wonderful projects that you're doing, and you're probably thinking, well, what's the right solution that's going to be able to, for me to create something in my portfolio to get me a job? And that is okay. However, having looked at many student portfolios, the strongest portfolios are the ones that have work that are based in who they are, in their own identities, and what they bring to the table, what it makes all of you, specifically you. And so how can you create work, take the briefs that your professors give you, and find out how you tap into something that is really, that genuinely excites you, or makes you upset about something and you want to find a different solution. But the more you can put your own imprint on it and celebrate your own identity, the more you're going to be able to talk about it in a way that's going to get somebody to want to hire you. Because when I've said this to many young designers, sometimes I'll see a portfolio and ask about a project. Why do you have this in your portfolio? And they'll say, oh, my professor said it was one of my best projects. Okay, well, what about it? What made it an amazing project? Well, I didn't really like it, but like it gave me an A, or like whatever the thing. And then I always question, well, then why did you, like, what is that telling me about you? Why am I going to hire you? What value are you going to bring to this agency and these clients and these projects if you can't even talk about work that you're excited about? So yes, it's always good to get an A, or always good to get a great grade, or however you're looking at it. But really make it about who you are and celebrate each one of those each one of your identities. You're all coming to the table with really exciting lived experiences. So how can you put that as part of your work? Because as you get into your career, there will be plenty of times where you're not going to necessarily be able to bring your everything you want to bring to it because of the constraints, but at least you are being true to who you are, and most likely, hopefully, finding a job or a studio or a role or a project that you're really excited about.
Good, yeah. I mean, we are confronted a lot of times with this tension between having students who are very interested in developing their own kind of look and feel and voice, but then our concern is that they're very restricted to a certain particular thing that they do, and they do extremely well, and it really truly represents them. But then the range for doing maybe more client-based work isn't visible in the portfolio. So there's always a tension about how to advise the student, whether to really celebrate that kind of individualized work versus work that looks like, it could have been made by an agency on behalf of, a company. So it's a kind of interesting dance, but I also think the way we answer it depends on the student, too. Some students are very interested in being kind of graphic artists, not so much graphic designers. There's a distinction in that.
Yeah, and I think that being in school is the perfect time to explore all of that. And I think that's what having professors and having projects are all about, is to find out, are you somebody who wants to go into illustration? Like you are an amazing illustrator, you have figured out a style and you want to really explore that. That is an opportunity to do that. Or then I think of that as a very graphic art. Or if you're somebody who's all about ideas and you want to be maybe you're more in the copywriting, art direction, and really getting into advertising and what that looks like, you are going to have to explore different ways to solve problems. So your portfolio probably is going to need breadth. I think all portfolio should have breadth. But yeah, but I think there is definitely a balance. But you should be able to talk about every single one of your projects in a exciting, profound way, because when somebody is across from you thinking about hiring you, they're going to hire you for who you are and how you talk to them.
Good. We're running out of time, so I want to make sure if anyone has any questions for Jess. Yes?
Yeah, on that subject, I was wondering what advice you have for designers for how to create a style in their portfolio that stands out and has a defined identity for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has to do with who the artist is. Like, what is it that you are trying to convey or say about yourself? Like, what, when you're thinking about a particular style, like, there may be times where you don't want to have a particular style. You want to show that you are a person of all trades. Like, you can do a lot of different things, and your portfolio should show that. If you are somebody who wants to create illustrations only come to my mind, but like an illustration style, like really double down on that. I think that there's no right or wrong answer of how you create your own style. I just think that right now is the moment for you to experiment with it. Experiment as much as you can, take as many classes with as many different professors, with as many different projects that you can do. Because there'll be some projects or things that you do that you're not going to like. You're going to well, that wasn't for me. But that's just as important. I think it's just as important to find out what you don't like as much as what you do like. And do more of what you do like. And then if you do have, if somebody sees a professor or a fellow student or family member sees something and they're like, tell them this seems really exciting, they might be able to help you kind of go in that direction. But I think experimentation is the name of the game right now in particular, but especially if you are in school and are starting out a career. Try as much as you can because when you get further in your career, then that's really when you can get really pigeonhole still work, can get really narrow. So experiment.
What other? Thanks, Gio. That was a good question. Any other questions? Yes, Terrence.
Ooh, Terrence?
So you mentioned along your journey, you were going to different cities, like you started in New York, then you went to Connecticut and Wisconsin. How did you stop from being discouraged from I know at this point you're saying that you're trying to build your portfolio. But during that journey, did you feel discouraged or maybe even discouraged?
Yes, all of the above. I feel like so when I was right out of school, everyone would say, Jess, you just need to be patient patient, things will happen for you. And that was the worst thing anyone would say to me, because I hate the idea of having to be patient. But it really is true. It is true. But I think for me, I have always been relentless in my own curiosity. Like when I see something or like something, I become so obsessed with it that I need to know like more about it. I need to find out how can I learn as much as I can. How can I learn from somebody? And so I have never, speaking of constraints, I've never necessarily put my own constraints that like, oh, I have to work in New York City. Like at the time, I like wanted to work in Manhattan when I came out of Madden, just because I thought it was more prestigious. But that wasn't the case. As I pursued more opportunities and I got this opportunity in Connecticut, I realized that was the time to be able to do work, and I was going to make the most of it at that moment. So you are gonna fail. You are gonna be turned down. You are gonna probably send out a million cover letters or a million emails or a million portfolios, and you're never gonna hear anything. But you have to stick with it, and you have to figure out what works. And if you get one little thread, one person emails you that like, you probably need a lot of help because stop emailing me, jump on it, jump on what that is. If you find somebody or you talk to somebody and they inspire you and you're excited, like ask them more questions. So it is hard. I know it's really hard, and I remember being so discouraged and so upset and so like downtrodden, but I think as long as you continue to get yourself back up, and I think finding your people and finding the people that are going to support you and going to tell you like, right, you might have just sent out a million portfolios, that really sucks, but what else could you do? What else could you do that instead of emailing, like don't give a say pick up the phone, but like do you do something different? Do you put something on Twitter or Instagram, or do you try a new way to do it? But you need people who are going to tell you that, right? You're not going to be able to do it alone. And that's the other thing that I think I really learned through the different cities and the different experiences and the different people I have met, that it is never just you against the world. And you have to find people who will support you and celebrate you and push you and be honest with you and debate you, because that will allow you, again, to find out who you are, what you like, what you don't, what might make sense for your next step, and never stop pursuing a creative life if that's what you want to do.
One thing, oh, yeah.
You talk a lot about creativity, and you're also a business owner, and I wondered if the two have been in conflict with each other ever, and how did you handle that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So yes, they're definitely in conflict with each other, but I think what I have realized, I feel like how I've gotten to running a design studio is because I wanted to know how you design a business, right? Like how do you, I was just saying to somebody else, like I never realized that like writing a vacation policy was just as important as having a great piece of work for a client. Like our vacation policy allows our designers and our strategists and our writers to feel that they can take time off, that they can decompress, that they can find outlets and do something different than the work that they have to do day to day. And I had to design without vacation policies. I had to design a work from home policy. Oof, don't want to do that again. But had to design conditions for people to be creative. So that has allowed me to continue to stretch my own design muscles in a different way. And I think owning or running a design studio, thinking about business, that is like the ultimate constraints, because that is what I am responsible for delivering client projects. I'm responsible for holding the team's timelines. I'm responsible for making sure that we get paid, that we pay our vendors, all the like not very interesting, exciting things, but at the same time be able to create conditions for people to make things that are spontaneous, that are intuitive, that are excited, and know when to stop the ideation, because it's like, well, you got to make that deadline, and when to just let it go, because that's when the magic happens. That's when things that we didn't know might occur in the creative spark. So there definitely is tension between creativity and no constraints and being amazing and making and doing and all the things, and then being able to build a business, because at the end of the day, business in our capitalistic society is all about revenue, right? It's all about bringing money in. It's all about, in many businesses, it's all about profit. It's all about showing that you can continue to do what you're doing. And there are real considerations as that relates to keeping lights on. But I like that tension. I like the tension between being really creative and then finding ways to make it a sustainable business. And that's what we talk about ThoughtMatter. We talk about how do we build a sustainable business and what does that look like today? Because I don't think a design studio in the early 2000s, early aughts, was thinking about business in a new and sustainable way. It was all about profit, profit, profit.
Any other questions? Because I have one, and I know it's kind of like the kind of question the professor asks, but I like to ask it. And it is, you said in an interview that you were very involved in things beyond the classroom in college.
Yes.
And I really want to keep hammering that, because you can go to classes and you can do the work in the classroom, but there are a lot of opportunities, particularly in this program and on this campus, to do other things that all inform your professional self.
I feel this is why Ken really invited me here, because I love joining things. I love being a part of groups. I love being a part of clubs. I love being a part. I just want to belong. I mean, I know that's what the title of this talk was, which was "Shape the World So You Belong." Like, you all need to find out what makes you you, and this is the time to do it. So join as many clubs as you can. Join as many leadership opportunities. Join as many internships. Because this is the time to do it, because at some point you're gonna be getting into a career, you're gonna be getting into like certain things, and you're not gonna have that chance. So when I was at Pratt, I went to like the club day, whatever that was in September. This must have been right after 9. It's right after 9/11. So I was like, I just need to be a part of something, like somebody just help me be a part of it. And I found a group called the National Sorority Interest Group. No idea what that was. But it was because it was a group of women who wanted to bring national sorority to Pratt's campus. Pratt at the time had local sororities and fraternities that were always getting in trouble, but they wanted to bring a national sorority to an art school. And so I joined, and I was like, I want to go to every meeting. What are we doing? How are we doing? And it turned out we got the chance to interview national sororities around the country. We got to interview these national organizations, asking them what are their values, what is their mission, what are they doing, how are they going to help us? Are they going to help us women on Pratt's campus be better? And it was probably one of the coolest experiences I had. And we ended up colonizing in 2002, and the chapter started in 2003. My sources are screwing out, I got this all wrong. And it's still there. There is a national sorority called Theta Phi Alpha on Pratt's campus that is decades old. And it was there because we as a group of women were so excited about that. And the only reason I was able to be a part of it is because I wanted to just join something. So I 100% believe that there's an opportunity for you to do something on this campus, give back to this campus in some way, have a legacy, think about your own legacy. You're here, you're spending your time, you're spending your money, your parents' money, whatever money you're spending here, you're here. How do you actually start to engage and think about in 10 years when you come back, what are people going to remember that you did? And there's a really big chance to make an impact. Same thing with internships, or same thing with helping, like if you have a professor who needs help doing something, can you help them? Can you do it? Because you'll learn something. You might learn you don't like it. You might join a club and hate it. You might do something on the campus and decide that's not for me. Or you do it and you realize, oh wow, I'm really good at that. I remember one of our first sorority meetings, they were like, Jessie, we really want you to be secretary. And I was like, you want me to write? I'm not organized, I'm not a very good writer. What else can I do? They were like, it's either secretary or president. And I was like, president. I will take that role because I will not have to write anything. And it actually turned out, and it sounds, but it was true. Like, I actually was a much better president because I was able to bring people together, I was able to do fundraising, able to get people really energized, because I knew that I was not going to sit and write something. That's not me. And there was other women in the chapter that really, they were great. They excelled at bringing it together. So find your place, even if it sounds crazy and someone says maybe you should lead this group, or maybe you should start something new. Do it, see what happens.
That's exactly what I wanted you to say.
That's why I was invited. Shape the world so you belong. Do it so you are here and you are excited about what you've done.
Right. Thank you so much. Really, this is the second event in our series, and so many things that you said line up with what was said by the other speaker, even down to the sorority, I think. Which is kind of strange in Reese Witherspoon. But we're really happy to have you here. Thank you so much. Obviously, we talked about there's other things going on, and you're obviously welcome to be here. But whatever you want to do. I want to give Professor Fisher an opportunity to talk about. So right after the alum panel, which is we're going to set up for right now, we're going to have a reception in the gallery. Now, the gallery right now has artwork. And that artwork is a show. And that show was conceived of and delivered by Professor Fisher. Maybe you could just tell people a little bit about what's going to be there while we go reset.
Okay. So the show inside is called The Weeks, and it was 25 people that I invited to join the show. They each had one piece.